All right, folks, I think we're about ready to get started. So most of you know me. I'm Dr. Kevin Clark. I'm your dean for this year. Spent a lot of the summer working with some of the folks that you see on the panel and with others that aren't here tonight or not here yet, some of whom you'll meet later. As most of you know, the Villanova School of Business has always had a close connection to the New York financial community. We have, over the past, I would say, 3 to 8 years, had a more purposeful approach to that. And with the help of some of the folks that are here tonight, particularly Bill Donnell, you'll hear from, and George Coleman, and Todd, and some of the other folks, we've strengthened those ties, and we've developed, in conjunction with the Clay Center and the Career Center, and particularly with Brenda Stover in the internship area, we have provided a lot more opportunities for you all to understand the connection to prepare yourselves for careers in financial services and affiliated fields. And one of the things that traditionally we do is this event to help give you the information you need to put your best foot forward and to really exhibit the behaviors that will put you in contention for that first internship, that first co-op, or that, in fact, that first full-time position with one of these prestigious firms. And so I'm not going to talk very long tonight, but I will be back around in the crowd later for the meet and greet, and you can always look me up in Bartley Hall. I want to get out of the way and let one of our very, very good friends, Bill Donnell, class of 77, who is at the Bank of America Merrill Lynch, talk a little bit more about the panelists, the program for tonight, and why we're all here. So thank you.
So myself and George Coleman next to me, we both graduated together. We were in the same fraternity, and about 8 years we started this. 8 years ago we started this program. Just by way of introduction, my name is Bill Donnell. I graduated from the business school in '77. I had all three of my children graduate here in '03, '06, and '09. And it's been just a wonderful ride. And we've watched this program really build and change and morph, and it's going to change a little bit tonight if you were here last year. Just as a show of hands so we get an idea of the group, freshmen and sophomores, just put up your hand. Okay, good. So there's a good number you here, freshmen, sophomores, juniors. Okay, so you're going to start looking for your summer analyst program in probably in October. And seniors. Do we have any seniors? All right, good. So on-campus interviews start probably the next week or two, and it's game time for you folks. So let me just talk a little bit about George and I both are members of the Villanova Financial Club. It's a group of alumni, about 100 alumni that work in and around Wall Street. We started the club in '82. We're really dedicated to helping you find the career of your choice. Probably over the last 10 years, we've probably networked in somewhere around 400 or 500 Villanova students into summer analyst programs. And Nick, I think you were telling me you're a product of one of those programs in 2007, and 3 or 4 times that in terms of interviews. And we're really happy to do it, and we're really happy to succeed that you succeed. We've learned a couple things in the last couple of years, and this kind of changes. One of, and it's just always been, is that Villanova is one of the top 10 universities hired on Wall Street. There are 300 alums at Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Citigroup, and Morgan Stanley. There's another 100 to 150, maybe even a little bit more at Credit Suisse, Barclays, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank. You cannot go anywhere on Wall Street without running into a Villanova alum. It's pretty incestuous, and people talk about it all the time. The other thing that we've learned, this is really since 2008, since the financial crisis, if you remember that, there's an emergence of smaller firms. It's an emerging power. And for you seniors, okay, you seniors out there, they're on a different interview cycle than are the major firms. So that's, for you seniors, that's going to be very important, as well as you juniors as well. So today, let me talk about how we're going to focus this program. There'll be 3 parts. The first part is interviewing in an investment bank. and George Coleman will take you through, the on-campus interview, the super day, what's going behind the interviewers' minds, how to prepare, what the questions are, and I think that'll be something very important for especially the juniors in this room this year in about another 4 weeks. Nick Seibert will take you through the small firm. Okay, it's a different interview cycle, a different mentality that you need to know about. It's important because there are a lot of firms there and there are a lot of Villanova alums there as well. And then lastly, and this has been emerging, it's been a theme of ours for at least the last 2 or 3 years. If you look at the amount of resumes that are submitted for jobs on this campus through the GoNova system, it'd be my guess that 70 or 80% of those resumes go towards positions in sales and trading and investment banking. But the number of jobs that are awarded are probably about 10% of the total pie at Wall Street firms. And about 20 or 30% of the resumes go towards these other positions, whether it's wealth management, it's operation, it's the finance side. There's a lot of other great careers that a lot of us don't really know enough about and need to know a little bit more. So Chris and Todd down at the end are going to talk about 2 such careers, and you really need to listen because it's kind of interesting. So let me just, before I unleash it, let me just kind of turn to the panel, and I'll take you through a little bit of background for each person. George Coleman, who graduated just a year behind me, was an accounting major. He started his career in 1986 as a sales trader. He ended up running the sales trading desk and then global equities, sales trading. He's a managing director at Credit Suisse. He's also vice chairman of global equities. He's on 2 very important committees at Credit Suisse. One is the Banking Management Council, and the other one is Global Equities. He's very accomplished. He'll be talking about interviewing in a large firm. George also had 2 daughters come through Villanova, the last one graduating last year. Following George will be Nick Seibert. Nick, just raise your hand. Nick graduated here in 2007 from VSB. He's a double major, finance and international business. He started his career at a small firm called FT Partners in the investment banking area, and he worked on mergers and acquisitions in the financial tech area. And he's the associate co-heading banking and technology for that company today. And he'll be talking about interviewing in a smaller firm. Todd Sullivan has been here half a dozen times. Todd graduated here in '95 with a BA, and he had followed on with his MBA at NYU. He's a managing director of the operations division at Morgan Stanley, and he's global head of interest rates and derivative operations at that firm. Before going to Morgan Stanley in 2004, he had a 9-year career at Lehman Brothers. And Todd is down there at the end, and he'll be talking on a career in financial operations. And then second from the right, Chris, I know I'm going to do it to you, Chris. Weidler is a 1997 alum. He graduated with an accounting degree. He had a different path. He didn't go straight into Wall Street. He spent 8 years at PricewaterhouseCoopers, first in New York, then in London. He then moved to Barclays in 2005 here in the States. And his current role is he's the MD and Global Head of Financial Reporting and Control. He's also COO of the Americas Finance Division. And he's going to talk for you accounting majors and finance majors. There's a lot of other careers inside of an investment bank that are very interesting, and they're also fairly lucrative, and he'll be talking about some of those opportunities. So without further ado, let me turn this over to George Coleman.
Yep. Thanks, Billy. So, how many people do you think we have in here? 200, 250? I have to say that the entire business school, there's 400 in each class, there's 1,600 people in the business school, something like that. I think that's about right. So I have to congratulate all of you for taking the interest in doing this. As every year we've done this for the last 8 years, you can see that there's more momentum, more interest. And I have to, in particular, no disrespect to the juniors and seniors, but the freshmen and sophomores, raise your hands again. Man, that's good. That is really, really good. If I was your father, I'd be proud of you, because you guys are taking this really seriously early enough. And those of you who've been here before, who were the seniors, you're aware of the fact that most of what I'm going to say, it's kind of the train left the station. It's all about when you're interviewing when you're a senior or even a junior for a summer internship. The opportunity to do the kinds of things that I'm going to give you the answers to the test. And Billy and I always talk about that. We were in fraternity brothers, and we had this thing called the files, which had the old tests in it. We'd go and share them and stuff before we went and took tests. So the great DTD tradition, I'm going to give you the answers to the test. But I have to tell you, if you're a freshman and sophomore, take this really serious, stuff I'm about to tell you, because if you follow what I tell you, the end result will be very, very good. Now, I can't see anymore, so I'm not going to read this to you, but I got from my classmate, who's the director of admissions here, Steve Merrill. In the freshman class, we had 15,000 applicants. We enrolled 1,600 people, so that's pretty, what, 11% ratio. The distribution of males and females is equal, which is great, because most schools it's more female than male. The average 50% range of the GPA in high school was a 3.7 to a 4.10, and the average SATs were 1230 to 1380. Now, why did I take that out? Is to tell you that you're smart. Everybody in this room is smart, and everybody in this room is a winner, because you've succeeded already in your life, and getting the job on Wall Street is you have to exhibit the confidence that comes from all the success that you've already enjoyed in your life. And so what I want to do is, and the reason I say that is, let's be real. Villanova is not a core school at all the large investment banks. Princeton, Yale, Harvard, et cetera, those are core schools. Those are the people that you're going to be competing against to get jobs. Don't worry about it. I became a vice chairman. You can do it, and you all have much better grades than I have, so you're all smarter than me. And so that's a very simple message. You're smart. You're plenty smart to work for me. Now, Billy talked about, everybody wants to be in that upper left-hand corner, right? How many people in here want to be? Like you see, you're shaking your head. What do you want to be, a trader? That's and those of you who walked in here today, how many of you said to yourself, I want to be a trader, I want to be a salesman, or I want to be a research analyst, or I want to be an investment banker? How many of you know the difference? Well, you guys know, because you've got, especially you, But, seriously, in this environment, given the headwinds in the industry, and I know the Wall Street Journals are free, so, down in Bartley, and I think it was 2 days ago, the firm Billy works for said they're going to fire 30,000 people? Yep. 30,000 people. I live in a town of 50,000 people. That means that like 60% of the people I live with are going to get fired. And so I have to encourage you in the strongest possible way to listen to this entire panel, because every job in every one of those boxes is a really good job. And those are jobs that if you become a managing director doing any of the things on there, you'll probably make more money than your parents make. So, people and take the upper right in private banking or wealth management. I'm 55. Let me tell you, I'm tired. I'm probably going to retire soon. Billy's a year older than me. He's planning on working 10 more years. Because wealth management creates the opportunity to stay in the game a lot longer. I'm the oldest person on the floor at Credit Suisse. Well, second, there's one now. You go on the bottom, you talk about asset management. How many people here have ever heard of a firm called Wellington? It's an asset manager. And I was there today. They're in Radnor. They're right by Radnor High School. And I said to them, how many people work here? They're in Boston as well. But I said, how many people work here? 2,000 people work there. The equity department at Credit Suisse that I'm in charge of is 3,000 people. So if you could be a partner at Wellington or be a managing director at Credit Suisse, believe me, you want to be a partner at Wellington. Now, most of you don't even know what that is. But within, asset management, you would call it hedge funds. It'd be mutual funds, trust departments, etc. There's lots of good jobs there. Do not exclude that from your list. And then in the middle, shared services is what Credit Suisse calls it. But basically, everyone says, oh, I don't want to be in operations, etc. That's a loser job. Baloney. It's absolute baloney. If you're someone who wants to have a little bit more life balance sometime later in your life, working in human resources is a tremendous career. Is anybody aware of the fact that the government is a little upset with banks and Wall Street? Just a little bit upset. So the biggest growth business inside Credit Suisse and every other major firm on the street is control. So any of those roles that revolve around legal compliance, risk, operations, those are all things that come under control. It's easier to get a job doing that than it is to get a job being a salesman, which I was. And so, I encourage you to go follow your dreams, do whatever you think you want to do, but be very open-minded, think more broadly. I had a Villanova guy come see me, I guess it was Monday, and he wants to do M&A. So I sent him up to a woman who graduated 10 years ago from Villanova accounting degree, got an MBA at the University of Chicago. And her advice to him was, because he didn't have the right background, was go work at Procter & Gamble, go work at Xerox. They have M&A departments inside these giant corporations. These are great companies. They come here on campus. Don't be afraid to go to those companies. If your ultimate goal is to work at Credit Suisse or Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, a path there can be going through being in the M&A department, the finance department, the treasury area of Procter & Gamble, et cetera, et cetera. So just be open-minded. More specifically about the interview. So how many people know what Super Day is? All right, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. We made a lot of progress. The first time we came here, blank piece of paper. All right, so Brenda, you give them the slides, right? Yeah. Okay, so take this slide when Brenda gives them to you, and right next to each of these competencies, you're going to write something down. So you are going to be asked about all 5 of these competencies. And so your preparation is all about, your ability to get the job is all about your preparation. And so, team player, collaboration, it's kind of, how many people have gone on a service trip? Okay? I highly encourage you to go on them. Great opportunities to be a leader. Is the captain of the lacrosse team here? Probably not, right? He's is the captain of the women's swim team here? It's like those are great leadership positions. Those are things that we're interested in. But you all have to think about, how are you going to provide yourself an opportunity for that? Problem solving, intellect, grades matter. Grades matter. Freshmen, sophomores, go to class, do your work, make sure you get those papers done. Drive an initiative, they're going to ask you about, we're looking for people who want to work. We want people who want to hustle. There's lots of ways to define that, and you've got to think about exactly how you fit in that. And then communication skills. How many people here have taken a public speaking class? Okay. Take another one. And then take another one, because you cannot succeed if you can't communicate. And, so I can't encourage you enough to keep taking public speaking classes. All right, so there's 2 ways you get it. The whole process starts with the first round interview. It's likely to happen here on campus. You might get invited to sit on a trading desk if you kind of network through the Villanova network, or your neighbor, or your uncle, or whatever, et cetera. Or it'll be kind of in the human resources department. Super Day is, if you get past the first round interview, you're going to get invited to Super Day. And what will happen at Super Day is there'll be about 30 candidates that you're competing against for a job that day. At the end of Super Day, we offer people jobs. So if you really are serious about this, it's your Super Bowl. This is like the day I knew I got an interview to go to Super Day at First Boston, which was the predecessor of Credit Suisse. I'm telling you, I was like, this is what I've been working all my life for, to get the opportunity to win. So just because someone's going to get a job at the end of Super Day. They're going to ask you about the 5 core competencies. You're going to have 5 30-minute interviews. Understand that you have to identify in the interview which are the 5 core competencies that they're interviewing you on, and have your answers already organized in your head about what is your message, what is it about you that makes you special when it comes to leadership or your intellect or your team play. Now, when I said I'd give you the answers to the test, this is from Assessment 101 at Credit Suisse. So this is what people at Credit Suisse are given in advance of interviewing you, you know. And so we tell them their job is, you know, to elicit evidence from the candidate to support their rating and competence and each of these competencies. The big message here is there's a lot of chatty people in the world, you know, and so we have to constantly tell the interviewers not to talk. You know, and so that's where the 80% thing is. I'm only telling you that because you have to recognize if you have, like, you know, chatty patty, you're going to have to figure out how to dominate, because at the end of the interview, if they dominate, you know, you're going to walk out and not have never had a chance to make your points. The interview structure will be something like this, and again, this is from Assessment 101. Where our job is to introduce ourselves, talk about how long we're at the firm, what we do, and the first thing they're going to do is try to put you at ease, because you're going to be nervous. And if you're not nervous, something's wrong with you, you know, because it's okay to be nervous. And they're going to ask you some question about, gee, I see you live on the Jersey Shore, I see you went on a service trip to Guatemala, I can see you play golf, and they're going to try to put you at ease. And so, you know, when they do that, you know, just relax, the air will come right out of you. You have 30 minutes. Don't waste time, you know. Recognize that you're going to be 2 or 3 minutes of this kind of break the ice thing, then there's going to be the 5 competencies, and then they're going to leave like 3 or 4, maybe 5 minutes at the end for questions. Be prepared to ask questions. If you do not ask me a question, there is a 100% chance you will not get a job. And actually, the quality of those questions will have a lot to do with whether I decide to offer you a job or not. You know, so it's pretty important. I won't read all these, but these are kind of, again, the answers to the test. These are sample questions that you're likely to be asked. Let's see, which ones did I really like? You know, the leadership ones are kind of easy, but to me, it's usually kind of like, you know, describe a time where you were in a difficult situation and you led or you figured it out or something like that. Results-oriented is all about ambition. It's about, like, you know, how hard do you drive? Do you have that attitude that, like, if I told you to, you know, go clean, like, these guys had summer internships. How many times did you guys go get pizza this summer from the guy downstairs because they won't let him upstairs, right? You're going to have all this no job is too small mentality, and we're going to stress test that for you. I can tell you, and it's too late. It's not too late, but it's kind of too late. If you had been a caddy when you were 16, or you'd been a waitress, or you'd actually worked at Dairy Queen when you were 16, 17, 18, we actually like that. Now, everyone's always afraid to talk about that, and there's different people have different points of view about that. But, you know, when I think about, you know, people who know me really well, I ask them, tell me what you were doing the summer you were 16. Now, what do you think I'm trying to get at? Work ethic. You know, because people who go get a job when they're 16 tend to kind of like have that extra drive that we're looking for. So you're going to get questions about drive and stuff. You're going to get questions about problem solving. They're going to try to figure out, are you a bright person? That's the area where you might get asked about the market. You know. So does anybody know what happened to UBS today? Union Bank of Switzerland. All right. Does anyone have a view about what's going on with the U.S. dollar? Does anyone have a view about, like, the budget impasse? You know, does anyone have a view about where long-term interest rates are going? You know, does anyone know where the S&P closed? Be prepared to be asked questions about the market. And the person who's asking you the question, if they knew the answers, they'd be a billionaire. So what they're really interested in, what's your thought process? How did you think about it? How did you develop, you know, they'll ask you a question, you answer the question, and how you defend your process of getting to that answer is what we're interested in. We don't expect you to be right. We know that you're only 20, 21 years old, etc. Collaboration, nobody wants to work with a jerk. Nobody wants to work with a jerk. All great firms put a high premium on working with good people. You have great opportunities here, again, like on service trips, you have your class things where you have to get together as a group, et cetera, et cetera. You can talk about stuff like that. And then lastly, it says Credit Suisse in here, but it could be Goldman Sachs, it could be Bank of America, et cetera. You know, if I ask you who Brady Dugan is, and you interview a job at Credit Suisse, dead on arrival if you don't have a view about it. The guy's been the CEO for 5 years. It's easy actually to find out a lot of information about me. You know, so do your homework, preparation, meaning that these core competencies you're going to be asked about, and the more you prepare and the more you think about it, and the more the freshmen and sophomores act on this, meaning build your resume, the better off you'll be. These are just some things to think about. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. You have to be confident. You have to shake hands. You have to do it firmly. There's the fish handshake, dead on arrival. Dead on arrival. Dead on arrival. You know, if you're a woman, you know, it's okay to go in there and give people a firm handshake, but it doesn't have to be the Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever, you know, but like just try to get away from the fish handshake, because it really, and then having eye contact as you talk to people. Don't be looking at your shoes, because even though you're going to be so nervous, you know, that you're going to be like wanting to look down, but look the person in the eye. We put in there dress to impress. I'm sorry because those of you who've heard this before, but it must have been like 5 or 6 years ago. Billy and I were down here for Parents' Weekend or Homecoming. We were in Kelly's and having a beer, and some guy that was like a year out of school came up to me and said, "Gee, you know, I'm working for PwC and I really care for it, and you know, can you help me get an interview at Credit Suisse and blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Okay, tell me about yourself." And he'd had a 3.8. He'd done a lot of leadership things. He was the president of his fraternity when here. He was like the real deal. So I set him up for an interview, and he shows up in a shirt that was the color that I guess I would describe as eggplant. You know, and I just make it simple. I look at all of you out here. I see lots of white shirts, lots of blue shirts. I see lots of red ties. You know, you look fine. You look good. Congratulations, you know. But like, just think about how you dress. You don't get that second chance to make a first impression. And if you come in with some, you know, I don't want to disparage any group, but like, you know, eggplant-looking shiny shirt, you're probably not going to get the job. You're probably not going to get the job. Same thing for women. You know, it's kind of like look professional. You know, your belly button showing. Maybe it looks great at Kelly's. It doesn't get you a job on Wall Street. All right, let's just call it what it is. You know, I've kind of touched on a couple of these things. You know, the most important thing to me on here is be confident, and the second thing is don't chew gum. Don't chew gum. You know, but these are all common sense things. But you'd be astonished how many people make it to Super Day and then do these stupid things. Things that will kill an interview. You know, people talking over people. I've had people talk over me. But while I'm asking the question, they're already like they're so nervous they're already answering the question. Like it's kind of, you know, borderline rude. Showing up late, you know, not being prepared, sloppy manners. You guys can read these on your own, et cetera, et cetera. But like rambling answers I just saw, like that's like, you know, you should be on point. Remember, back whatever I said, we got 30 minutes. You got 3 or 4 minutes in the beginning, you got 3 or 4 minutes in the end. You got 18, 20 minutes to convince this person to give you a job that could change your life. You got 18 or 20 minutes. Go for it. You know, have your answers thought and organized in your mind before you go there. And with that, I will pass it on to Todd.
Nope.
Oh, is this in the wrong order?
Nick.
Oh, Nick. Okay. Sorry.
Thanks, George. Yeah, so Bill and the folks asked me to talk a little bit about interviewing at a smaller firm, and certainly going to touch on a lot of that. I'd also probably like to make a few points on how certain things would be different in a banking interview than what you might be used to on one of the other job descriptions mentioned up there as well, because I think there are some nuances that everybody should be aware of. I mean, for a point of context, how many people here have done kind of corporate finance or a banking internship? Oh, okay, pretty good amount. So, you know, working at a smaller firm, how is it different than Morgan Stanley or Goldman or one of these big name firms you have heard of out there? Maybe start with another question. How many people in this room have heard of Catalyst Advisors? One. So Catalyst Advisors is a firm started by a guy by the name of Frank Quattrone, who used to be at Credit Suisse many years ago, and thus far this year have done more deals than some of the big name banks out there, and a lot of the very reputable deals within the tech sector. And so, point being, there's a lot of firms these days that are starting to move into the kind of forefront of services that aren't the kind of old name institutions that you would recognize every day. And so I would encourage a lot of you to look at those types of firms and ones that you might not otherwise have heard of, and think about that as a potential career, because there's a lot to offer that wouldn't necessarily be at a smaller firm. So how is it different being at a place like that or where I work at FD Partners? One, they tend to focus a little bit more on specific things. A lot of small firms on the banking side tend to be advisory shops. You know, I kind of cringe when I ask a kid in an interview, you know, what do you think banking is, or, you know, what do you think you'll be doing here, just to see kind of how much homework somebody has done on the firm. And they'll mention something about, you know, underwriting IPOs, and that kind of just makes me, you know, cringe a little bit in my seat, because we don't underwrite IPOs. We provide advisory services, and many of the smaller firms on the street don't do that because you need a balance sheet to do it. And so, you know, one, I would say make sure you know kind of what the firm does. It doesn't mean you have to know a lot about it. I didn't know what financial technology was, you know, when I graduated and started the firm I'm at now. I mean, in the cab on the way to the airport here, I happened to see that two of our clients provided the technology that let you swipe a credit card in the back. So it's kind of cool getting to learn a lot about a specific sector and then seeing it every day. But you don't have to know, you know, the ins and outs of the specific sector or whatever they happen to focus on to really be successful. But you have to demonstrate that you want to be interested in it, is one thing I would definitely say. You know, how else is the time frame? Timing-wise is different than the bigger banks. You know, I think it's accelerating these days. I didn't finalize my career plans until probably in, you know, the winter of my senior year. Most banks are kind of done recruiting in the fall time frame. So, you know, you need to kind of be aware of what the specific firm does. If it's a smaller firm where they're only hiring 2 analysts a year, they might not know what that current class or their replacement needs are. And so you kind of have to be in touch with people there, or be very up-to-date or proactive about finding out what that is, because it might not be the standard. We're going to come down and do the super day, or do on-campus interviews and then have a super day in October. It might not work that way. You know, and related to that, at a lot of smaller firms, if it's something you're considering, I would, you know, recommend getting to know somebody who works there. A lot of times, if it's, you know, 10, 20, even, you know, up to a couple hundred people, it's very intimate and small, you know, kind of circles. And so if you send me an email before on-campus recruiting starts and say, hey, I'd just like to learn a little bit about, you know, banking and what you guys do, especially if you're a Villanova grad, I've had plenty of those calls. And, you know, the next time that person, you know, submits their resume with everybody else through the on-campus recruiting system, it's not just another name. And so, you know, that probably applies to larger firms as well. But if it's a smaller firm you're considering, I would definitely get to know the people there, not only to get in the door, but you know, you hear it a lot, but I think fit really is important at a smaller firm. You know, I work on a team of people that's, you know, kind of like 30 investment banking professionals, and you really do spend a lot of time with people in the banking environment. And so it's something you want to know where you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. And so if it's not an environment you feel comfortable in, or someplace that you could see yourself getting, you know, excited to go every day, then that's probably just as valuable, because you really want to know the kind of people you're working with and, you know, who's there. And that really is important. You know, how else is a kind of a smaller firm different when you compare yourself to a bigger firm? I mean, you know, we focus on kind of the mid-market. So companies anywhere from roughly 100 million to potentially a few billion in value. And, you know, those look a lot different than, you know, Microsoft and IBM and Dell and the other companies like that out there. And what that means is you need to be able to wear a lot of different hats. You might be able to get away with being the numbers guy or the presentations guy or something like that at a large firm, where you can very narrowly silo your skill set and experience. And that's great, and there's probably a role for you. You know, probably a few weeks into my job, I was talking to C-level people as a kid of 22 years old, and had, you know, was kind of wondering why these people cared what I thought. But, you know, point being, we're looking for people who can both play up and play down. So some days as an analyst, you might be, you know, feel like a managing director at a small firm because somebody leaves you alone to run a client meeting while they have something they have to run out and do and take a phone call. And then some days, you might be, picking up the luggage off the carousel or something, right? You have to be very, I'd say versatile is definitely a thing we look for a lot in candidates we talk to, both guys who we think could be, somebody you could put in front of a client because you'll have to when, if you're kind of back running models or LBO models all day at a larger firm, then that's probably not necessarily the, most important quality. That translates a lot into, I think, another important point of, when you join a firm that's maybe not necessarily as larger and structured. I mean, we now have a more formal analyst program, but for example, when I started, there wasn't necessarily a program, and most banking programs tend to be a 2-year analyst program with potentially a 3rd-year option, and then people will go into private equity or hedge funds or asset management or swear off banking and finance forever and go do something else, or work in the corp dev department of Microsoft and do M&A there because it's a great training ground for things like that. But we look for guys who could potentially be a longer term type person, not necessarily going to go find the door after 2 years. And that's definitely something you should ask about too if you think that it's something you could see yourself doing longer term. And definitely a benefit of being at a smaller firm is that there is potential and flexibility. In my case, I got promoted after 2.5 years, and that was something I saw myself doing and being interested in. So went down and talked to the founder of the firm and worked something out. You're not going to go talk to Brady Dugan or whoever it may be at a larger firm, and the flexibility and something like that is great. And so I think that's an important consideration. Nobody has a crystal ball into what they're going to be doing, a couple years down the road. But if that's something you're considering, then not only would I consider it, but I would think that that's something you want to sell to them as well. Because the best people, certainly for the kind of things we do, is somebody who's already been there and knows what they're doing. And so there's a huge cost to recruiting. There's a huge cost to people's time to interview and go out and find potential associate candidates that would be coming in at kind of that point in time. And so if we could keep guys around, that's the best tool we have available, is training good analysts and turning them into good associates versus going out and trying to pick kids out of, MBA programs. Some of the other things I would talk about, like I said, wearing a lot of hats. The best person, I would definitely get an understanding of what you're going to be doing every day. We do a lot of things specifically that wouldn't necessarily make the best analyst at, a bulge bracket firm the best analyst for our firm, both because of things like I mentioned before, where you kind of have to be able to wear different hats, or just even the types of companies we work with and that sort of thing. So as you're thinking about, interviewing at different types of firms, I would definitely get an understanding of what exactly they do. Some other things that are a little different, and maybe you should just even know about smaller firms, that whole middle bucket that was on the presentation earlier about some of the shared services, those don't really exist at a lot of smaller firms. So again, you should definitely understand the roles you're getting into, and also just the culture of the firm. I always tell people, we're a 30-person investment bank on the West Coast. I describe it to people as the mentality as a East Coast bulge bracket firm, meaning, you're going to work hard and it's going to be an intense experience. Just because you're in what would generally be considered a regional office at a smaller firm doesn't mean it's a 9-to-5 job, and, you don't work weekends. And, you should definitely get an understanding of the culture, and ask about it in an interview with the people you're going to be working with, because there is no, one culture across a lot of small firms look very different from each other. So it's not like you can just say this smaller firm is different than that one, just like you couldn't say the compared groups within a bigger bank. So definitely, just as much as it's important for you to understand, or them to understand what your skills are and proficiencies, it's important for you to understand kind of the background and culture that you're getting yourself into, because after doing it for a few years, you do realize people say that a lot, but it does hold true that the people you're working with and the culture of the place there is, very important. Nothing is worse for us than having somebody, investing in them 6 months, and taking a lot of time to bring them up the curve, and then realizing that this isn't the best place for them because it's not good for you from your career perspective, and it's not good for us from the fact that we just spent a lot of time training you, and then that's kind of like a lost cause. And then, some other things as I think about just general interviewing that I would kind of convey to you as well. I mean, having a story is one of the most important things you could do. I mean, for me, I'd worked in sales and trading to even get to that point at Morgan Stanley the summer before. I worked at a firm to knock on a lot of doors. I went through a process where I kind of found things I liked and what I didn't. It's great to see so many freshmen and sophomores here. When I showed up on campus, I didn't know who or what Goldman Sachs was or any bank for that matter, really. And, so have a story as to why you're there. I want to hear a compelling reason as to why you want to be here and why you're the guy. There's obviously a lot of you interviewing for the same spots, and you want to know that the person is committed and passionate about what they're getting themselves into. And that's one of the biggest things we look for, certainly, is somebody who has a good reason why, because you're going to work hard and you're going to have high expectations set on you, and so you want to know people know what they're getting into. Even just things like in a banking interview, one of the layup type questions would be something like, what are 3 different ways you could value a company? Whenever I ask that, it's not because I actually care if you know how to build a DCF or what transaction comps are. It's because it means you cared enough to look ahead of time, because that's something that is in any interview guide that you'll read. And so when people don't know answers to questions like that, it's kind of like I just want to hang up the phone because the next 15 minutes are kind of a waste of time. And then the one thing I'd say in banking is, as maybe that's a little different than something like trading or some of the other areas, is you can get by being smart enough and using hard work to make up for it. And so, like I said before, you want to see somebody that's passionate and willing to run through walls for you, because that's a big part of it. And if you can't trade fixed income swaps or don't have enough good math skills to be able to do something like that, then you're probably kind of stuck. But if you're a smart enough guy and say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to work hard enough and outrun everybody else to learn, then I'd rather have that than somebody who's had 5 internships and kind of thinks they know what they're doing. And that's definitely important too. And so I think that's a lot of the main differences between kind of a smaller firm and a bigger firm. And I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards as well.
Right. Thank you.
Oh, you already did it. Thanks. I'll try to keep this to about 10 minutes so you guys do get some time for question and answer, because I think we want to hear from Chris as well. Everything George said about the interview really holds for any part of big firm interviewing. The way you dress, the way you behave, the way you interact, the way you have to set a first impression. You don't get a chance to do that over whether it's ops, finance, technology, audit, compliance, legal. Doesn't make a difference, right? We all work in the same firms. The culture is pervasive throughout the firms, so we are looking for the same kinds of things. We are thinking about the same kinds of things. We're going to be influenced by the same kinds of inputs. The things that do differ, and I'm going to walk through specifically what's different about operations and the way that we interview, and it's going to be different school by school. It's going to be different employer by employer. Use the resources you have here. Use the Career Center. Ask Carol and her team how it works, what we do. I mean, Morgan Stanley's been coming here to this campus for years recruiting. We've actually adapted our program over the years so that we do our first round and our super day type structure here on campus, which means it's different. And the reasons it's different is you're not competing against 30 people for one job back in New York, where those 30 people come from whole different places. You're competing with probably something like 6 to 12 people for maybe 2 or 3 jobs, but they're all your classmates, peers, and friends. It changes the dynamic of competition when you're competing against your classmates, fraternity brothers, sorority sisters, friends, or enemies. You know the people you're actually competing with. It changes the dynamic. Think about that and think about how you prepare yourself for an interview like that might be different than the one George described earlier, where you're going to a place you've never been before, sitting in a room with 30 people you don't know. Some of the people around you when you're in those rooms actually already work for the company. Some of them are actually the students who are interviewing. Think about where you are. You're always in the interview, okay? And that goes for our process here on campus as well. Right? When you get invited to the first round, you get invited to a pre-night, take advantage of every opportunity we give you to meet the people you're going to interview with. At Morgan Stanley, we do come down here and we meet with people. We're going to be down on October 3rd to do an analyst presentation. We're going to bring some recent grads who actually went to Villanova, who are working in our jobs now. We're going to come down here and talk to you about what life is like in the real world. They're going to talk about their experiences. We're going to call some people, some of which are sitting in this room, who have worked for me over the summers, right, or done a co-op with me for a semester. They're going to talk about their experiences. They talk about giving away the answers to the test. These are people who've actually done the job, who've been through that process, and they're not sitting on the other side of the table like me. They're sitting in the seat you're going to sit in, and they've made it through successfully. Right? Use those resources. Okay? Ask them questions. Figure it out. We want you to be successful. Morgan Stanley happens to only send Villanova grads back to Villanova to do interviewing here. Take advantage of that. Okay? Every time you guys do better, and George talked about the statistics for the school, it's a top 10 business school, the academic credentials you all have. Thank you, because you all make me look a lot better. Right? I did not graduate from the school with those academic credentials, but I did now. Okay? Take advantage of that. I want you to be successful because it makes me look better. The interview structure that we use in operations when we come here, and Goldman has a similar structure when they come here. Many other firms come down and do similar type of structure here, and you're going to see this with some employers, is we do a first round interview one day, the next day is super day. Okay? You're going to get a call sometime in the evening to say whether or not you made it past first round. Okay? The interview structure is typically a professional fit interview. And that, like, in the example of George's core competencies, that interview is, do I want to spend 12 to 15 hours a day sitting next to you? Okay? And that is what we're looking for. Right? Are you the kind of person I want working on my team? Are you the kind of person I can trust to do things? Are you the kind of person I'm going to give things to and know that you're going to come back and either ask me intelligent questions or deliver the results? Right? Not come back and say, gee, I didn't understand. Right? Those are the kinds of things we're looking for there. In the second the second day of interviews, there'll actually be a series of interviews usually. There's an interview for process management and project management, and look for things specifically about operations. And do you think about things in a way that demonstrates you understand that there is a process to life? What operations does in financial services is not entirely dissimilar from what operations does for every industry in America. Right? And every industry has operations. Right? What I do, I could do for General Motors. I'd probably have a worse stock portfolio than I do now, although the current one stinks pretty bad too. I can do what I do for General Electric. I could do what I do for United Technologies. I could, be an operations manager at Sikorsky Helicopter or Otis Elevator and Escalator Corp. None of those jobs historically have paid as well as my current job. Okay? It's the reason I'm in financial services. But it is a skill and a profession distinct in unto itself, right? Separate from banking, sales, trading, finance. Chris is going to talk about those skills. What I have is a different professional career track. If you don't recognize that and don't do the homework to understand what that means, you're going to have the same problems you have when George asks you who Brady is. Okay? Because you tell me you haven't done your homework. So do your homework, and I'm going to give you the answers to that test now, because it's not as easy to find. Okay? You can't Google for what does operations on Wall Street mean. I don't know, maybe you can. Maybe there's some of these answers. I'll give you what I think the answers are. And you're going to have to figure out a way to take these answers and put them in your own words and convince me that you understand what they mean and you've done some homework to figure them out. Operations are part engineer, part firefighter, part accountant. Okay? Most of you got some of the accounting training here. Okay? Most of you guys are VSB students, right? Anybody non-VSB in this room? Good. I was non-VSB, just so you know. Political science. You can survive on Wall Street, trust me. But engineer, firefighter, accountant, that's what operations is. The engineer, process improvement, change management, solution design, implementation. How do we change, fix, implement, and build the things we need to do to run Wall Street? Okay, operations is not, filling in trade tickets. It's not reconciling blotters. Those are functions that get done within operations, but that is not the value we add. The value we add is how do you change the world every day? And trust me, the world is being changed every day. Okay? The firefighter part, risk management, crisis management, 2008, when Lehman was going down, we didn't call our sales and traders back to the office. We called a couple of them back. We called a couple of key risk managers back, and we called the entire operations, finance, compliance, legal. Those teams came in, technology, right? Because we're the ones who are going to get the firm back on its feet for Monday morning because we just lost one of our top 5 counterparties, right? Those are the things that you have to think about as the firefighter role within operations. right? And it's not, thankfully, always like the fall of 2008. Although this summer has felt like a perpetual season of the fall of 2008, and it's not over yet. We certainly have to think about the fire drill I've been running all day today, since the headline I read this morning at 4 a.m. about UBS's $2 billion loss, right? Because it doesn't just affect UBS. I'm going to be running scenarios for the next couple weeks, responding to regulator inquiries about how could this happen at Morgan Stanley, what have you put in place to fix it, how have you asked and tested all of your processes, how have you done the self-testing, the self-assessment, have you pushed hard enough, have you thought about this, have you thought about that. That's what we do. Okay? And the accountant part is you have to understand how to make that tie into what the business is, and the business is about money. You have to understand how we make money in the businesses we're in. You have to understand how the products work that we trade. You have to understand what happens when things go wrong. What would the impact of a change be if somebody proposed a change? What happens if a process fails? What's the cost? Okay? And the way we think about operations, and that's sort of what our global head of operations calls the 3 pillars of operations, is we think about control, we think about commercial, we think about people. Okay? Control is the risk management, the accountant, the firefighter, engineer, the risk management part of that. How do we make sure the firm doesn't fall apart? Okay? Across operations, we settle over $6 trillion worth of transactions a day, and that's just at Morgan Stanley. If we don't show up for work for one day, the firm's gone. Okay? That's not the same as any trader or any salesman anywhere in the firm. We'll survive a day without them. If operations doesn't show up, it's over. Okay? That's the kind of control we have to make sure that never gets questioned. Okay? The commercial part, we obviously make money by running our businesses. We can't do it if we don't have the infrastructure, systems, technology, and control processes in place. Either we can't actually do the trade, or our regulators tell us to cease and desist. And many banks have been given things called memorandums of understanding, which are basically a nice way of saying, stop trading because we don't trust you anymore. Okay? Those things don't happen if operations does their job. Okay? And then the people part is, operations probably more so certainly than sales and trading has a leadership and management career path in it that's much broader. There are clearly leaders and managers. I mean, George is one of them clearly for Credit Suisse. But the number of people we have in operations and in infrastructure divisions far outweighs the number of people and individuals who sit in the revenue side of the business. So you think about the career path and track for building a management career, the opportunities are much bigger in operations. So you're going to get opportunities early in your career to manage teams of people, right, to actually be in charge of people development. And if we don't have the best people in the right jobs, with the right skills and the right training, we can't do the control and the commercial part. Right? So it's the critical third part of our jobs. Being able to understand how to translate your life's experiences, your skills, the things that you can bring to a job and put it into the framework of the engineer, the firefighter, the accountant, and understand what control, commercial, and people, and how you can articulate that's what operations does, is going to get you the win when I ask you, because frankly, and you guys will all at some point in your career interview somebody else. We like hearing people are interested in what we do. Okay? It makes us respond positively when we're interviewing somebody that they put the time and effort in to learn what is my job and why is it you want to do it. Right? It's an ego thing, and trust me, there's lots of egos on Wall Street. I want to know you did the homework to find out what I do. Right? It's not a foot in the door to get to sales and trading. If you take that track, you will be disappointed working for me. I guarantee you. But if you want to do what I do, or you at least want to learn as much as you can and get an opportunity to do what I do, you're going to have a great career. I certainly have. I've been doing this for 17 years. George is right. You can, any one of those 4 or 5 sections of that first Venn diagram you put up there, right? We all have critical roles in the firm. I've made it to managing director. I've had a very successful career. It's far from over. I've got young kids, far away from Villanova still. I got a long career ahead of me. And, many of you will find that opportunities in careers like mine will pique a lot of the interest that you think you have. And frankly, if you tell me that you don't, I don't believe it because I don't think you can think about it enough yet. So that's where I wanted to sort of get to, and we'll answer some more questions.
Which way do I go here? Good, great. Well, I have an easy job a little bit because I think Todd stole a little bit of my thunder in talking about all the non-front office type jobs. But what I'd like to do is 2 things. Is one, very quickly echo everything George talked about and Todd talked about in terms of what's important in an interview. And I've had careers in audit for a few years. I've done consulting overseas in London, and then I've worked for Barclays Capital for 7 years, both in London and in the U.S. And in my entire time there, all of those principles that everybody's talked about hold true. Probably the only practical additional advice I could give is maybe two things, and that is to at all costs avoid the use of slang. As much as I might have been flattered that I still looked young enough to be called dude, it was maybe not the most appropriate thing that I was hearing from the candidate. Also, cursing. I know it sounds simple, and I know it's because people are nervous, but after the third F word in an interview, I think that it might be time to cut it off. So I don't want to duplicate all the things that we talked about, but those are certainly some practical things, and I know nerves can rule a day, and the most important thing, I think, is to use that, right? Because nerves, if used properly, can come across as energy and enthusiasm, and all of us feel nerves at any point in our careers, even now. Certainly for me in some of the situations that I play in. And if you could somehow use that as energy, it comes across incredibly positively and like you care, right? Sometimes the most calm person can come into a room, and sometimes you just wonder if they really care about what they're talking about. So use that to your advantage. And then really what I'd like to talk about is a little bit about the finance space. That's what I've done for the past 7 years at Barclays. And before that, I was in audit. At Coopers & Lybrand and PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I think I'd like to talk about that in the context that Todd did, which is all around why are these roles interesting and what do we do? And really the role of the finance department is to partner with the business and to partner with the other areas of the firm in order to meet the firm's objectives. And, if I think about the world since 2008, the importance and the profile of the finance department has gone incredibly upward, right? The trajectory of what we do and the value we bring to the table, or at least that perceived value, because I think it was there before that, in the eyes of investors and external regulators and the business, has certainly gone like this. And that's for a few reasons, right? Whereas before the crisis, in the good times, it was about, hey, did we get the books right? Are you guys record keeping? Are you keeping score? And sometimes it was easy to think of ourselves that way. Now, if you look forward to what finance does, it's across the board, right? And whether it's product control, and some firms will use these terms differently, but they broadly mean the same things. Product control, whose job is to partner with the business to understand their positions, their risk, what their P&L looks like and their revenues, and make sure that their inventory positions are consistent with the firm's objectives and mandates. Whether it's financial control, which is what I do, and understanding our position from a regulatory perspective, and I'll talk a lot about that in a minute, and are our legal entities okay? And that's critical more than ever, right? Because, if you look at the way the world's going and a lot of the regulation, you have a lot of, I don't know what the right phrase is, but the U.S. looking after the U.S. and the U.K. looking after the U.K., et cetera, and it goes on and on. And there's very good reasons for that, given some of the crisis issues that came out of 2008. But understanding the way the firm looks and our governance at that level is absolutely top of the list when you talk to regulators or government representatives or even the business, right? Because they know that that's what their clients care about. Some of the other groups in finance are FDS, or Financial Decision Support or Financial Planning. And these are the guys who do our competitor analysis on our strategy and think about the firm's results in the context of the market, the peers, and really help us get the message out there to the investor and analyst community. As much as everything over the last couple of years, it's been important about positioning and where firms are going and which ones are stepping up to fill some of the void that's happened because of the Lehmans have gone away, and Bear Stearns and some of those others, and how is all that playing out. So we'll talk about, what is the value that those guys are bringing versus maybe where we were a little while ago. And I could ask people to raise their hand of, who's familiar with Dodd-Frank? Has anybody heard of Dodd-Frank? Okay. Has anybody read anything or heard about what's going on with all the mortgage litigation at B of A and others and mortgage putbacks? So, right. We've all heard about the Lehman bankruptcy, right? Okay. All of those things, when we open up a newspaper in the finance department, we're front and center on. And we're dealing with from a firm-wide perspective. As George and Todd talked about, a lot of the trading and sales guys are obviously focused on their asset classes and their customers in that particular region or business. From a finance perspective, you look across the whole firm, right? And you get involved in these things at an extremely senior level. You know, to put it in context, some of the things that I've done in my career was being in the boardroom on a Friday night in September, sat right next to Bob Diamond and some of the others as they were arguing back and forth in terms of how this trade was going to look, with questions coming to finance going, okay, if we structured the deal this way, how will that look from a regulatory perspective? What will be the results on the firm? Is this a positive result? And to have a seat at that table with such senior people thinking about the entire firm and its impact is quite a powerful position to be in for the finance group. And it's only gotten one way from there. You know, before the crisis, you know, the resources of the firm were not scarce, right? Leverage was okay. The use of capital was okay. It wasn't something that had this incredible scrutiny. Now it's all about the use of resources, okay? The conversations I have on a daily basis with front office traders, with their COOs, with head of desks, all about how can they optimize their use of capital and what's going to be the impact of the change in the rules on their business model. That's a seat at the table. Right? And that's a seat at the table that you grow into to be a trusted advisor to the business. And more so than ever, those things are critical. Because every day you're dealing with the regulators, and being from a British bank and having international experience, on any given day I'll talk to the FSA, the Fed, the SEC, all about how we're using those resources. And how do we know that the business is actually, you know, going in the way that they're mandated to do, not taking on unnecessary risks. So that's a great place to be in from a finance department. And we're great partners with our operations colleagues, our other infrastructure colleagues and risks, et cetera. But it's now a place where you have that seat at the table. And, you know, a great way I like to think about it is when I started my career as a true accountant at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I was out at a bar, I might be asked by anybody, well, what's your job? And I would twist the truth just a little bit. You know, I'm a consultant. I'm a risk manager. I'm all of those things. Post-2008, when I was in London and they had the pitchforks and the torches out looking for bankers, I very quickly confessed that I was an accountant. And it didn't take long, and it's, you know, we wear that badge proudly now. So it's again a good feeling to be in, and I don't want to, you know, I can't stress enough that if you think about these finance roles, they're absolutely critical to the way that the firm is growing. And to be clear, you know, as somebody getting in the starting point and the bottom level, you know, obviously it's important to earn your piece of the pie and learn that and know what that looks like, and then expand that through your network, because you are in a unique situation in finance to have access to the rest of the firm. And that's, you know, another thing we talked about is getting out there, those communication skills, the networking. That will be far and away the most important thing you can do in your career in any space. Right? Because you can be the best operations person in the world, but if all you want to do is sit down at your desk, you're not going to be effective. But if you bring those interpersonal skills and everything to that job, it's amazing how quickly you're contributing value and getting paid for it to very senior people from your finance role. And in some cases, it is nice to look at that newspaper in the morning, get up and say, you know what? Hey, I can call my mom and say, you see page 1? I'm doing that, right? I'm involved in that. I might not be able to tell you everything about it, but hey, I'm there. And that's a great place to be in from finance, and it's all about the value proposition shifting that way. You know, I think that's most of what I would have, but, you know, I would end with something that I talked in the beginning, which is I've got, you know, I spent an enormous amount of my career in London, 7 years, and I've spent about a year in Asia. And everything that these guys have talked about tonight holds true in all those places, right? So all the slides that I won't go over, but that holds true, right? In any career and anything else. Be prepared, be enthusiastic, be confident, give the right handshake and presentation. We're not expecting you guys to know the whole world and how it all fits together, but we're expecting to know that you guys care, and that if we hire you, you're going to put in that effort. That's going to make us, you know, proud that we've hired you, right? Because we've got the right person who's going to grow and develop and take all those opportunities. So with that, I think I'll finish. But, you know, anybody who would like to talk more about finance, will certainly be here for a while. And turn it back to Bill.
I'd like to thank my fellow panelists here. That was terrific. A lot of great information. We have the opportunity to ask some questions. There's 3 microphones up here, so if somebody has a question, we'd love to entertain it for you. So you just come on up, and while we wait for the first person, I had one question, Todd and Nick. It's just more specifically, in an investment bank, Todd, when do the firms actually come down to interview for a summer analyst position, meaning a junior, and then for a senior? Then Nick, the same question for you.
Okay, so the seniors, for those jobs that are still available, and I mean, George was right in the beginning, the game is almost over. The full-time hiring program starts in about 2 weeks, so we'll be, as I said, October 3rd, Morgan Stanley will be down about that same time frame. You'll have most big banks down here first week of October to do their information session, kickoff, analyst panel, something like that. And in second, third week of October, the interview schedules start. Some firms will do a first round here and then do a super day type of thing back at a headquarters location. Some will do like we do, which is first day here, the next day we do the second round, and we finish and make decisions as we leave campus. So that's by mid-October. And then the summer internships or summer analyst programs typically kick off about the same time in the spring semester. So kind of first week of February, you'll get the information session and things. Mid-February, end of February, try to do it before spring break. Have the interviews done so that you have those job offers for the summers before the end of February.
Yeah, and for us, it's constantly moving as some of the bigger firms, we're trying to move up in the process and not be too far behind. We had on-campus interviews this week at another school on the West Coast, and the resume drop here, I think, concludes the 19th of September. So it's pretty early for us these days as we're kind of moving into some of the more normalized cycle. But like I said, I know plenty of firms that kind of what you'll find is a lot of, as the needs come up, they'll look to fill it. And so if it's somewhere you want to look at, I would very much encourage you to reach out to them and figure out that time frame, because it's hard to say much more standardized that it's October, the first week of October or the first week of January. They do tend to lag a little bit behind some of the bigger firms, but everybody's constantly moving up time frames these days in the kind of race for talent. So not too far behind, but I would say a little bit lag, generally speaking, behind the larger firms.
Bill, if I could just make one more comment, which is Chris's question about Dodd-Frank, mortgage litigation, Amir, any of those things. Maybe people are just trying to being a little bit shy. First of all, don't do that. And second, figure out what Dodd-Frank is. Have an opinion about what you think it's going to do, pluses, minuses, impact, something. You may not be right, but have a thought, have a process. Do not answer that question with a blank stare in this market. Right? It is the single biggest piece of legislation affecting the financial service industry since the Depression. Find out what it's about.
George, and I guess the sales and trading is a little bit earlier than that for summer analyst positions.
No, it's the same. It's the same thing. It's game on right now for full time. So and then I would just encourage the juniors. It's as soon as you get back from winter break, right after Christmas. It's very similar. It's like it's a January, February thing, and it's all wrapped up by early March.
And Chris, I'm waiting. If somebody has a question, I'll ask a couple but I know some of the things that we might have missed. But feel free to step up to the mic. And Chris, I noticed that you worked at Cooper's Library, Price Waterhouse. Yep. To fill one of those finance roles, what does the background kind of look like? What do you need to have to enter one of those roles?
At Cooper's and Library or?
No, at an investment bank like Barclays.
So one of the things that I thought was invaluable in my career about working at a public accounting firm was very quickly you get thrown into a responsibility. And it's the same in investment banking, but by definition, year one may not even last a year before you get promoted, and then you're managing a group of people. So you're doing that very quickly. You're also put into a position where you're getting, you're forced to get those relationship building and networking skills because you have to constantly talk to your clients. You have to constantly get that network and learn how to do those things. How do you get information from people who may not be willing, may not be always the happiest to see you? And, coming from those professions, that is something that if you can demonstrate that you had that opportunity very quickly to have those management skills and those interpersonal skills, particularly on might be investment banking clients or other financial institution clients. That's it. I mean, that to us is flashing lights that this is somebody who we're really interested in, because they bring to the table that sense of, I got to get out there. I got to network. I got to learn what others do. I want to share with them what I do. And those skills I continue to believe above all others are the most important in your career.
And I think we saw a couple of hands go up from arts and science students. I've seen George Coleman answer this question before, but George, you run sales and trading at Credit Suisse on the equity side. Is everybody on that floor a business major? Do you have to have a...
By definition, you can't be, because if we recruit at Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, they don't offer business degrees. You can't get an accounting degree, a finance degree at those colleges, the liberal arts schools. So by definition, what we're looking for, whether it be at Harvard or at Villanova, or God forbid Georgetown, that we're looking for the core competencies. We're looking for, we already talked about, everybody's smart enough. So, that's actually not hard to find. It's the other intangibles that we've been talking about here in terms of the energy, the interest, the passion, the problem solving, the way you think about things. And so if you're in arts and sciences, if you're in engineering, even if you're in nursing, and that's not what you want to do, there's plenty of things within my Venn diagram for all of you to do, including sales and trading.
And Todd, I just had a question, because I've heard you in past years talk about this. If we were in a restaurant, and you had identified somebody in operations, who would that person be? What would they like? How would their mind work inside of that restaurant?
Well, it's actually it's a way I've broken the ice in interviews when I ask people about process management, because it's probably not a way you've thought about much of your life. But if you're the kind of person, as I am, who you walk into a place like an au bon pain or one of these sort of casual dining restaurants, and you look at the way it's set up, and you constantly see people running into each other going in and out of the kitchen, or you see that the bar is set up in a way that it's between the door and the tables, and every single person has to walk through the place that you try to pack for happy hour because it's where you make your money, and you recognize that it's just an asinine way to lay out the building. You realize they had nobody with an operations mindset think about how to set up the logistics of that building. Right? Those are the kinds of things, and it drives my wife nuts, but those are the kinds of things that I think about and comment about, because that's what my training in operations has taught me to do. Right? I worked in restaurants here. I mean, there are places that are long gone now, but Marita's and Gators were two places out in Bryn Mawr that used to be some of my favorite places to hang out. But I worked there, and there were things about the kitchen that would frustrate me because it was just laid out stupidly. Right? I've studied operations management. I have a master's degree in it, and I go into banks and I watch banks set up things where there's a very clear, most efficient way to queue people in lines to get to multiple servers, and almost no bank in the world does it the right way. Right? You go to the TSA at the airport, and the way that they set up the security lines drives me nuts because it's not an efficient way to do it. It's frustrating. It destroys customer service. That kind of mindset can also be applied to things like processing trades, reconciling things, where to put people in physical locations around the world. That kind of mindset is the kind of things you think about when you think about how you analyze process management, the way things get done. If you think about that mindset, about the things you do in your life, you will find examples where you go, yeah, it's really frustrating to do that, and now I think I understand what the frustration is caused by, because you recognize there's a better way to do it. Right? That's, if that appeals to you and wanting to fix that kind of stuff, those are the kind of things that make you successful in operations, and frankly also in technology. But the practical applications in operations, the technical applications in IT and technology.
Okay.
I'll talk about it. My name is Jake Dice, and my question is for everyone out here, where do you guys see the economy going in the next year? And sort of, since we're talking about jobs, and obviously there's a lot of news, across the street, Bank of America laying off large amounts, Swiss banks laying off large amounts. How is that going to affect recruiting on campus, and what should everyone here expect in terms of realistic trying to get those first-time jobs next year or summer analyst positions with your firms?
Can everybody hear that question? Yeah? Okay. George, you want to take the first part?
Well, have you heard the phrase, it's the new normal? Well, we're running Credit Suisse as if it's the new normal until it's not the new normal. And so we think it's going to go on for a while. We think that the solution to a recession that was caused by excessive debt, whether it be sovereign debt in Europe or housing here, it's going to take many, many years to work off the debt, and so as a result, it's going to be very difficult for the economies to grow around the world, and especially in the developed part of the world. So the impact on that will be that, it's not going to be as exciting as an industry as it was when I was lucky enough to get in the 1980s. Your question on hiring for this year, it's mostly done. To be honest with you, I mean, it's not completely done, but it's mostly done, and at least in sales and trading. I can't speak to other parts of the bank, but my colleagues here can. And in terms of if you're a junior, to me, it's really ups the ante to game on. When I told you it was the Super Bowl, maybe it's the Super Bowl and I don't know. What's that thing? American Idol? I mean, it's like this is the moment. You got to go all in, and you got to be prepared, and you got to think about the things we talked about today, because there are going to be fewer spots. And my prediction would be that for those of you who are sophomores, there's going to be just as many fewer spots, if you will. That the trend is smaller until something changes dramatically in the economy, and the economists at Credit Suisse would tell me that anemic growth is the future, and interest rates will stay at 2% longer than people think. If it's Japan, then we're 3 years in and 17 more to go. You'll be my age.
I want to just answer part of your question because it's the third time I had it mentioned here about Bank of America. That's where I work, and I've worked at Merrill Lynch for 28 years. 30,000 jobs is a very big number. I mean, it's just huge. Let me just put that in context a little bit. There are just under 300,000 people that work at Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. The great majority of those, well over 225 or 230,000, work in what they call the consumer bank. Okay, those are the banks that you see on the stores, on the different streets. And for 25 or 30 years, Nations Bank then became Bank of America, just bought different banks. So if you go down to Avalon, New Jersey, which is a 3-month town, you'll see 3 branches in a block and a half. Okay, and you see a lot of that because as they bought different banks, they acquired those banks, but they have 32 tech centers. They should only probably have half that. They have 24 deposit centers. And they probably have about 600 too many banks. So out of that 300,000 people, yes, they'll probably lay off somewhere in excess of 30,000 people, but that is where it's going to be centered. And what we look at in terms of Wall Street or the investment bank and wealth management, it's probably going to be somewhere around, 3,000 or 4,000 people, which is nowhere close to the 30. So that's just to answer your question.
If I could add something, I would say that to me just stresses the importance of the summer analyst program. I mean, for me, having come out of school a few years ago, when I looked to interview in the fall again for full-time jobs, a lot of banks said, we're not taking anybody that didn't do a summer with us, and we're not even taking all of them. And so if you can have a good summer experience and translate that into a full-time job, that's 10 times better than trying to do the full-time recruiting after the fact.
That's the optimal thing to do, but don't give up. Do not give up. And I'm sure my colleagues are about to say, these guys are in growth businesses. They probably have lots of jobs. I don't know, but you have more than I have. I know that.
I think, and Bill's point is right. The 3,000 or 4,000 people that they're going to lay off from the broader investment bank of Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, right? Only because I'm going through budget right now, it doesn't save me anything to get rid of a first-year analyst job. Okay, when the firm is trying to save money, and be clear, that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're eliminating the roles that are very expensive to maintain. And people who are energetic, willing to work 20-hour days and get paid not nearly as much as expensive people in our industry, those are not the places you cut people, right? The first place you don't cut is India, right? But the second place you don't cut is your summer interns and your analysts. First of all, it's a pipeline. That's how you bring people in. We are going to have attrition. People leave our industry every single year. People leave our firms every single year. We hire replacement employees. The overall headcount may go down, but it's not going to go down to the satisfaction of any stock analyst, research analyst, or investor by eliminating our entire incoming pipeline of employees. Okay, so yeah, I would have loved to have hired 16 new analysts this year. I'm probably only going to get approval to hire 12. Well, I only hired 10 last year. Okay, I'm still up. Okay, I'd like to be up a lot more. The reality is we're not throwing as much money at things as I would like us to do, but it doesn't mean we're shrinking the businesses. And with Dodd-Frank to implement, EMIR coming right behind it in Europe, 27 different jurisdictions to deal with in Asia, the changes in the way we trade, CEFs coming into the OTC world, clearinghouses being mandated, right? Implementing hundreds, if not thousands, of rules from the SEC, the CFTC, understanding what those mean. All of that takes people. A lot of that takes smart people, and a lot of it is going to be you guys learning how to help us do that, right? None of us are experts because rules haven't even been written yet, okay? The jobs are going to be there to learn how to implement these things, and the way firms are going to save money, save headcount, save cost is not by slashing their incoming hiring. Doesn't mean it's going to go unaffected, and to George's point, it means game on, redouble your efforts. The opportunities will be fewer. They will not be zero.
Yeah, and I mean, I think just from a Barclays perspective, that's exactly the same message. I don't see our pipeline shrinking of analysts or grad roles. What I do see happening is the competitive nature of those roles over time becoming more difficult. So, whereas, and I can only talk to the Barclays experience, for the entire time I was there up until the last 2 years, we were a smaller shop until we got to Lehman, and then ballooned, and it was this continual growth trajectory. So the pipeline of people we were bringing in hasn't changed at all, but the competitive landscape of how many of those people do we need to keep 3 and 4 years down the road as they work their way through their analyst and grad programs is more difficult, and you should expect that and welcome that, right? And that's where the differentiation comes. So, I would echo all these guys' points, which is, that's the pipeline, and we can't just shut that down. We all know we need it, and we're very supportive of it.
And Nick alluded to it. For all of you non-seniors in the room, co-ops, internships, opportunities to get your foot in the door, recognize that, one, that's a place you can make some money and learn and get some experience, but two, it's an extended period interview. It's exactly why I allocate some of my budget to hiring co-ops and summer interns, because I want to spend 10 weeks watching you work, or in Segal, was it about 12, 14 weeks for your co-op? There's no better interview than watching you actually perform a job for 10 or 12 weeks. Use that as an opportunity, because when I extend you an offer at the end of the summer or at the end of your co-op, right, that's when I'm really sure about, because I've watched you actually work for 2.5, 3 months. Right? That's an opportunity to get you into a real job, as opposed to the kind of job where we come to campus and we make a decision. We might say, we'll hedge our bets a little bit and maybe not give all the offers out right now. Right? The ones we do at the end of these programs, we want you to commit because we're committing to you. We've just spent 10, 12 weeks training you. I want you back because now you're not just an entry level. You've actually got somebody who's got some marketable skill, even if I don't put you back in the same job. You understand the culture a little bit, you understand the firm, you know what you're getting into.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Coleman. It's only like a
The prospect of working on Wall Street seems so abstract and far away, but I was hoping that you could illuminate for me, I know the panel is on interviewing on Wall Street, but I'm more interested behind the philosophies of working on Wall Street. Why work on Wall Street to begin with? What are the lesser known benefits of working on Wall Street besides the obvious pay or the people that you get to meet, or besides the obvious challenge? What makes you walk in your day-to-day life? What makes you say, or enable you to say, I love what I do and I do what I love? This question's for anyone.
George, you want to take that?
It's a good question. I like it. I'm unusual in Wall Street in that I've only worked at one firm for 25 years, and because it is a kind of a funny industry in that people tend to move around a lot, and the reason I love to go to work and the reason I so much enjoy working at Credit Suisse is the people I'm around, and I like the energy of the people I'm around. I like the intellect. I like the competitiveness. I like the fact that everybody on Wall Street kind of really knows what's going on, and they're really paying attention. And I'm not saying that they're smarter than anybody else, but they tend to have. Again, I've never worked at Procter & Gamble. I've never worked at Xerox, but they have a certain passion to win, and it's that intellectual curiosity that it's fun to be around. It's very team-oriented to win. You know, you can't do things by yourself. And so, to me, it's those are the other things. The truth of the matter is that you're all winners, and you're all going to be successful at what you do, and you're all going to make more than enough money to take care of yourself and your families, et cetera, et cetera. And I can assure you that money doesn't make you happy. I didn't have any when I was a kid, and maybe I have a little bit now. But it might make life a little bit easier. But you're all going to get to that spot. So if you consider going into it for money, don't waste your time or my time, because you're not going to be able to do it. You have to be stimulated by these different challenges. And one of my great frustrations is that the number of people who are on the Harvard lacrosse team or the Yale football team that are following their teammates because that's the next thing, you know, because 25 years ago, 35 years ago, when Billy and I got out of school, like none of this existed and stuff. And so you got into it because you were really interested in it. Now, a lot of the people who interview are just interviewing because they hear, wow, it's like the next thing. It's like I'm really competitive. It's just like trying to compete to get into Villanova versus getting into X, Y, and Z. And those are not the people we want. We want people who are passionate about wanting to do this and wanting to be around those kinds of people. I don't know if the other people would add to that.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly right. And I think, you know, it's not far off from day to day that the challenges change. And because of that, you need people who can work in that environment and who really work well and change and like new challenges. And it just seems to be an industry that attracts that sort of person. And if I just think over what my career was, and it started with a tech boom, which became a bubble, which quickly morphed into an Enron and WorldCom and other accounting scandals, which again went into a subprime boom, followed by 2007 into what we have now. And while I might be talking about some gloomy events, I don't mean to. I mean to articulate that in a sense of challenges. Mm-hmm. And you have very bright, dynamic people who thrive in that environment and who really like dealing with that sort of changing pace and culture. And that's certainly what I enjoy from it.
I don't think it's by necessarily design, but George was right. I mean, I'm not at all surprised to hear he's the second oldest person on the trading floor. It is a go business. It's not, you know, we're not professional skydivers, but it's a pretty adrenaline-driven business. People's energy, focus, attention are on all the time, and it's addictive. It's, you know, the reason I keep going to work and I love my job is because I haven't stopped learning yet. I stopped going to school a while ago, but I haven't stopped learning. And when I'm not learning, I'm teaching, and that's almost as rewarding, and you'll find that over time. And when it stops being fun, I'm going to stop doing it. Right? But so far, after 17 years, hasn't stopped being fun.
Let me just add to that. I'm in private banking. I've been here for 28 years. In 28 years, I have there's not a day that I didn't learn something. Every day I learn something. Every time the phone rings, if you think about it, well, you don't have the turn knob on a TV like I used to have when I was little, but you think about the clicker. Every time you click the clicker on the TV, it's a different show. Every time the phone rings, it's a different problem or a different opportunity. And at times, it feels like it's coming in like a fire hose, like in 2008 and 2009, and it gives you a charge. It's addicting after a while. And it's a great career. You know, Sally Krawcheck, who just left my firm, asked me. She said, "Bill, you're here 28 years. You're 56 years of age. How long do I have you for?" And I'm fortunate to be in a career that's a little different than some of these fellows here. But I said, "Hey, look, I intend to sprint for another 10 years till I'm 66, jog till I'm 70, and walk out of here on my 50th." And that's kind of the way I feel about the business. It's a great business, no matter which end of the business you're on. So we need to kind of move on with this program. There's three things that we need to continue. I'm going to do two of them. George will follow up with the last. There's a couple of resources banging around these buildings here that you need to know about. George talked a little bit about the on-campus interview. Okay, the way this works is the Go-Nova system. Everybody know about the Go-Nova system? Okay, so all the opportunities, whether it's a summer analyst program or it's a full-time job, go into that Go-Nova system. And for some of these positions, there's 40, 50, 60, sometimes 70 resumes. Okay? Todd is only going to pick 10 people to interview. Chris is only going to pick maybe 10, maybe 12 on a good day. If you're not one of those 10 to 12, you're out of the game. You don't even get a chance to show what you have. Okay? There are 2 spots on this campus where you can have somebody tear apart your resume and rebuild it so that it's perfect. Grammatically, format, content. Use it. Down at the Career Center or down in the Clay Center. You need to do that because if your resume isn't perfect, there are too many resumes there, it's not going to get selected. The second thing is you do not want to walk in to see George Coleman on the on-campus interview and have you be your first interview. It's over. It's not going to be there. There are 2 resources on this campus where you can go and you can have your interview taped, your interview critiqued, okay? And I would highly suggest it. One is in the Career Services Center, and the other is in the Clay Center. And if you're a freshman or sophomore, take advantage of it. Juniors and seniors, I'd run down there tomorrow morning, all right? It's very important. You do not want to make your interview with someone that's interviewing you your first. And the third thing, there are resources like your parents, your professors, friends, relatives, and even alumni to work on your interview skills and with your resumes. So I would take advantage of all that. Lastly, something that's probably not quite as pleasant, but I need to kind of bring it up because something happened on this campus last year, which is a little unfortunate. So a place like maybe a J.P. Morgan or Bank of America or Morgan Stanley, you probably have, what do you think, about, Todd, about 600 summer analysts in total?
Yeah. Easy.
Okay. Out of that 600, you might have what they call 1 renege a year out of 600. Okay. And what that means is, so if you're fortunate to get a summer analyst position or you're fortunate enough to get a full-time hire, you'll get a contract in a couple of weeks. You sign and you send it in and you have a job or you have that position. What a renege is that you get it, you shop for another job, and then you come back a month, 2 months, 3 months later and say, sorry, I'm not coming. Okay? Once you sign that paperwork, that firm releases all of the other candidates, and it happens very, very seldom. I would tell you on Wall Street it is a very big place, but it's very small. Everybody knows something about everybody. You only have your reputation. And that you don't want that saying that so-and-so, that John Smith reneged on his offer. Because think about it. One of George's sales traders might take an order that has a notional value of $500, $700 million. And there's nothing written. It's all on the phone. Okay? Buy me 500,000 of XYZ stock. All right? It doesn't speak well for your reputation. So if you get an offer, you're not sure, you want to be a sales trader, and you get an offer in operations, and you don't think you want to do that, don't sign the paper. If you want to do it, go sign the paper. All right? The second thing that'll happen is we probably had 16 to 17 summer analysts up this summer. For Villanova, what'll happen if there's a renege, that next year, it won't be 17, it'll be somewhere like 3, 4, or 5. So it'll hurt your fellow students. So it happened here last year. I never heard of it happening at Villanova for probably the 10 years that I'm coming down here, and it happens very seldom, but I just wanted to share that with you. So before we wrap up, I'm going to bring George up, and just for one final thought.
We lost the power.
We did? I did?
I'll do it.
You didn't do that?
Yeah, I'm not do all. You're thinking I'm stupid just because maybe I am. I thought it was this one. So, what's that? No, that was already. It doesn't matter. I don't need it. So those of you who were here last year, you heard this. But so, how many people here actually had a summer internship last year? This past summer? So that's probably looks like more than like 2/3 of you. How many of you used a Villanova alumnus in some fashion to get that job? Less than I would have thought. Less than I would have thought. How many of you have had a brother and sister come visit you for the weekend while you in your time here, or one of your best friend from high school? And when you took them around campus, like, did you go in the Davis Center? Did you go in Bartley? You know, did you show them the new dorms down on South Campus? Were you proud or embarrassed? Did you feel like you were playing for a winner, or did you feel like, you know, the place is kind of dumpy and you didn't really want them to see that stuff? And how many of you have ever watched us play Georgetown in basketball? And how many of you really get upset when we lose and really enjoy it when we win? So the slide that belongs up there talks about alumni, the percentage of alumni who give money. And Billy and I have been doing this for 8 years. How many jobs do you think every summer when the Villanova Financial Club has that event, there's
400 to 500 in the last 10 years.
So we've done 400 or 500 summer jobs in the last 10 years. Ultimately leads to people getting jobs. The Villanova network has a lot to do with that. Somebody had to give the money to pay for Bartley's redo, someone had to give the money for the Davis Center. The value of all of our degrees has increased dramatically. You know, we're number 7 school in U.S. News, the Bloomberg U.S. News report. And so when I see the slide that I was going to put up here shows that the percentage of alumni who even give $10 is 21%. And Georgetown and BC and Bucknell are kind of like 29, 30. And Notre Dame is 45 and Princeton is 65. I just suggest to you that those who came before you did a lot to build the school. Everybody in this panel and all of the alumni here are here for one reason and one reason only, is somebody helped us along the way. I would never have this job at Credit Suisse were it not for alumni who helped me. And so I'm suggesting to you that as your life unfolds, remember that you came here tonight. Remember that people took the time. Remember when we beat Georgetown, that you want to beat Georgetown. And one way we can beat them is to, you know, everybody give. Now, you're all you are in school, so it kind of seems silly to talk to you about it. But I understand from the day you walk on Notre Dame's campus, they're talking about this. And so, you know, for us to be a truly great university, which we are now, but we can be even greater, I hate to tell you, but you need money. And so for us, I would ask you all to think about that as your careers unfold and develop and so on. So with that, you've been really great. An hour and 35 minutes to sit still is annoying. So I give you great credit for doing that, and thank you.
So I think on behalf of everybody out here, Bill, George, Nick, Chris, and Todd, thank you so much for giving us advice on interviewing and giving your views on the job market. We appreciate the time you've taken to come back and help your fellow Wildcats. And I'm sure each of us has taken something valuable from the discussion we've had tonight. And I particularly liked the 5 competencies, the part about not chewing gum, and the part about giving back. So I'll continue to think about through my career, and I hope all of you do as well. I hope that with our effort and with the continued help of our great alumni, we'll have even more Villanovans on Wall Street in the future. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Matt, who will introduce our networking session. Thanks again.
I'm Matt. I'm the co-president of Fixed Income Society. I'd like to reiterate what Amanda said and thank the panel. Also, I'm going to introduce everyone here for the networking event. So, as I say your name, if you could please just stand or give a wave so that students can kind of put your name to your face. So, from AXA Advisors, we have Michael Cippinelli. From BlackRock, Larry Shrew, Thomas Colamago, Joanna Steinberg, Christina Park. From Citgo Fund Services, William Reminelli. My apologies for any mispronunciations. From Credit Suisse, Dave Chitty. From Gregory FCA, Amanda Chun. Also from Gregory FCA, Jimmy Mook. From Hamilton Lane, Carol Stewart, Julie Lukoff, and Jonathan Floyd. From JP Morgan Private Bank, Jeffrey Walsh. And from PNC Financial Services Group, Matthew Formsworth. From Stifel Nicholas, Taylor Labar. And from Vanguard, Ashley Barton. So with that, I think we're ready to start the reception. Thank you.